dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle. And let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, I am sitting down with Sean Geoghegan, winemaker for Derby Wine Estates in downtown Paso Robles. The building, which is easily spotted from the 101 freeway thanks to its height and salmon color, used to be the Paso Robles Almond Growers Building. Derby Wine Estates has 3 estate vineyards across the Central Coast. During the conversation, we discussed the history of the building, and I had the pleasure to do a comparative tasting between the 2011 and the 2021 1510 white. If you listen to a lot of podcasts, you know that many ask for Patreon. We do not plan on doing this, but we do ask you to support the podcast by leaving a review. It takes only a few seconds of your time, but means so much to the show. The next best way to support Exploring the Wine Glass is to tell your friends. If you enjoy the podcast, your wine-loving friends will too. Finally, don't forget to head to the website, exploringthewineglass.com, to read the blog and to sign up for the newsletter so you can keep up with all things happening. Sláinte!
Give me the red wine. Give me the...
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, Spanish wine scholar, sommelier service, champagne and Côte d'Aron specialist, and a WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. Stay in the know about all things wine by visiting my website, exploringthewineglass.com. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass.
In the Bible, water go turn right in.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor, sponsored by Dracaena Wines. I am your host, Lori, and today I am sitting in a pretty special building in downtown Paso Robles at Derby Wine Estates, and I am talking with winemaker Sean Geoghegan. So welcome very much. How are you doing today?
Fine, doing good.
Yeah?
Been a bit of a rough morning. I had a goat escape, but got the goats back. Things are back on schedule.
Okay. That's not exactly something you normally hear, had goats escape.
Goat wrangling, early morning, Friday morning, goat wrangling. Yeah.
Oh, now I just have a new vision in my head of you with like the Texan lasso thing.
I'm all hat and no cattle.
All right, so my first question is, and I had said before we got on the fact that, you know, I have to do a little research or whatever. So, and I'm hoping it's the right Sean. County Wicklow?
Nope.
Wrong Sean?
Too many Sean Geoghegan out there.
Oh, damn.
They're thick with them in Cincinnati.
Really? All right. I was like, oh my God, because I just had Wicklow wines on. And I was like, well, now there is a, you know,
There's
two
another
worlds
Sean
colliding.
Geoghegan winemaker?
There is, and it was...
I thought I at least had that locked down.
Well, I actually don't know if he's an actual winemaker, but he is in the wine industry, and all I did was find a picture. It was his father, and he was in the wine industry, and there was a picture of, you know, 3 young boys, and one of them was Sean. So
Not me.
Oh.
No family history in the wine industry.
Oh, okay. And no Ireland?
Some Irish, but not me personally.
Oh, okay. All right. Damn, there's why goes my first question. All right, so let's talk about your origin story. How did we get here then? So you did not come from Ireland.
My origin story, yeah, it's actually a pretty traditional. So I grew up in the Bay Area. My family moved to Sonoma Valley in 1994. So I was always kind of exposed to the wine industry. Obviously not really a wine drinker at the time. I ended up going to UC Davis, studying viruses and plants, and working at the Foundation Plant. It was then called the Foundation Plant Material Services. They changed the acronym to Foundation Plant Services for PR reasons. So that's a facility that brings in clean agricultural stock, nut trees, strawberries, sweet potatoes, and grapes.
Okay.
Kind of a weird mix, but so if you want to bring in your favorite French clone of Mourvedre to plant in Paso, then you need to, legally, you would pass it through the Foundation Plant Services. They would check that it's virus-free, and then you can either release it to a nursery or propagate it yourself for your own use. But that was kind of how I got exposed to the wine industry. I didn't want to continue down the road of studying viruses and plants. It was just very detail-oriented, very focused. I felt like I was not really cut out for that. So I ended up kind of changing my studies at the last moment to get a degree in viticulture and enology. Then I moved to the Santa Cruz Mountains and worked at Mount Eden Vineyard. It's a very old vineyard kind of on the edge of the Silicon Valley there in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I worked there for about a dozen years. Met my wife, and she's a winemaker as well. She was working for Randall Graham at Bonnie Doon.
Oh.
At the time, we were married, and then we ended up relocating to Paso for a job that she got, and I came down here, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. The Santa Cruz Mountains are a very different place to make wine than Paso Robles is. So I worked for a vineyard management company for a couple of years and kind of really figured out what was going on in the area. It's such a large AVA. There's so many microclimates, soils. There's so much going on. And then the job at Derby came up, and I tasted the wines. I'd already knew Steve Vieira, our vineyard manager, through my work in the vineyard side of the industry, and saw the building, tasted the wines, learned about the vineyards, and I was kind of sold. So in 2019, I started on as the head winemaker here.
That's very cool. So viruses in wine. So, I mean, when you walk through a vineyard, you can see, like, you're knowing, well, this is going to be red blotch, or this is, hopefully not there, but, or things like that. You can see that kind of before it becomes, for us, not so popular. We got to wait to see the bad signs.
Viruses are very, very sneaky. You can have a cultivar, a clone, a selection that's infected with virus, and it will never show it. And then you take it to another site, and it immediately has all the symptoms. And then a lot of the symptoms tend to be for leaf roll and red blotch. They can be not necessarily virus specific, and throughout the year they can change a little bit. But sometimes I can see one and be like, I know that one, that's leaf roll too, or something like that.
So those dang little viruses, kind of similar to humans, huh?
they're very sneaky, the viruses,
And now that has nothing to do with the old Graciano goof here, because that's not virus.
I think that was just a spelling error.
Really? Well, all right. They just, and so I brought it up, but for those who don't know what the Graciano goof is, you want to share a little bit?
There's probably someone who can tell this story better than I can. However, my understanding is that a well-known nursery who supplies a lot of the plant material to Paso Robles brought in some what they thought was a clone of Mourvedre. It turned out to be a clone of Graciano, and everyone thought, hey, this is the best Mourvedre I may have ever tried. It grows so well in Paso, because Mourvedre is another variety that has some issues with virus and some clonal issues. It's hard to find clean Mourvedre that does really well. So everyone was like, this grows great, the good yields, the acid's great. And then someone eventually figured out, oh no, this is not Mourvedre, this is Graciano. And I think what happened was that I haven't thought about it in a while, the French name for Mourvedre is Monastrell.
Yes.
And the French name for Graciano might be Mostrel.
Oh.
So I feel like someone just dropped an N somewhere.
Correct. That could be.
That was my understanding, but I may have mixed up the nomenclature there a little bit. But there's my understanding it was more of a nomenclature issue rather than a.
Yeah, I don't think there was any deviousness trying to be in there. But what was interesting, I was in Spain, where Monastrell, in Jumilla in Spain, it's queen, right? They call it their queen. And I was telling them this story. And they were all flabbergasted that we could be so confused by the grapes, by the way it went. And I'm like, well, it really is just kind of a silver lining, right?
Well,
or bronzish.
Give us another 1,000 years, and we'll probably have a more intimate understanding of the Spanish variety.
Right. Right. But they really were. They're like, how could you get those two? I'm like, well, they do look the same, And I was telling them the same thing. Everybody was so happy. They just this is the best grape ever, and we just were happy with it. So yeah. So we are in a very historic building here in Paso. So you want to tell us about the building, the history of it?
Sure. So this is the Paso Robles Almond Growers Cooperative Exchange Building. So it was built in 1922, so it's just over 100 years old. We had a little party last year to celebrate its centennial. It was built to support the local almond industry that was quite large in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So large, in fact, that there were 40,000 acres of almonds planted at the peak of the plantings here, which is, I believe, more than we have grapes planted now. So you can imagine how important that industry was to the community. I think the decline of the industry was very rapid. So they built this building in 1922, and then less than 20 years later, the industry had collapsed and the building was basically abandoned. There are a lot of factors that went into that. I think the biggest one is that during the Great Depression, they used a lot of the excess labor of the state and the federal government to create the big water projects that we know now, like the California Aqueduct that brought irrigated agriculture to the southern San Joaquin Valley. So most of the industry here was dry farmed almonds, with big spacing in the hills around Paso. When irrigated agriculture happened, basically, I think the yields in Paso were so low, and the price of almonds dropped so quickly that the industry basically became insolvent because yields were so high, and the irrigated Central Valley, the industry here just couldn't compete. So the building was basically turned into grain storage. So there's dry farm barley in the area, and some wheat was a big deal after the collapse of the almond industry, and then that industry also kind of went the same way as the almond industry. So eventually the building went through a couple iterations just as a warehouse and was finally just abandoned. So it was really kind of a blight on the community. And the Derbys bought the building in the, I want to say around 2010, 2011. I'm not quite sure. It was before my time. And they worked with the Historical Society in the city to really just make it a new building, but also to make it look almost exactly as it was before, but modified a little bit to be a wine production facility. So they completed production they completed the renovations in 2014, and then opened as our winery and tasting room here in downtown Paso. And it's I think there's a lot of synergy in the fact that the almond industry was so huge for the community at the time. Now that the wine grape and wine production and the hospitality that goes along with it is such a big deal for the community now, I think that the fact that we're using it for wine production, I think there's some nice synergy there. And it just was a great thing, I think, that the Derbys did for the community as well, to kind of restore this. It's a beautiful building, and it was, again, just kind of a blight on the downtown landscape.
Do you have pictures in here of what it looked like before it was renovated?
Yes. Oh, not there.
Well, not physically in this room,
yeah,
but
I have one on my screensaver, so it always kind of reminds me. This is.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I heard that date of when Derby's been here. So to me, this has always been here, but I'm not originally from here, right?
Yeah,
so we moved here. Our first vintage was 2013. So it just seems like Derby has always been
in this building
and part of Paso Robles, and I mean, honestly, it's a pretty easy building to spot, right?
Everyone says, we've seen your building 1,000 times, and today we decided to come in.
Right. And now the color was that the original color? Did they keep that, or
no? I believe the peach is pretty
to what it was.
It was hard to tell because the old pictures, I don't think it had been
were black and white.
50. No, it hadn't been painted in 50. They either were black and white or it hadn't been painted in 50 years by the time the color photography came around.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's something that you can see from the freeway, and it's even from downtown. And a little birdie yesterday told me that it's actually the highest building.
The tallest building in
Paso.
I don't know. It was. There may be some contenders now, but I'm pretty sure if you go to the top of the tower, which was the silo, so the almond growers would bring their products, imagine up 101 through the front of what we now consider the front of the building, which was probably the back at the time. The almonds would go in the silo. There was a series of compartments within the silo, and then they would ship out. The railroad tracks are on the other side of the building, and so then they would ship to the Blue Diamond Cooperative in Sacramento, which is the larger kind of statewide cooperative.
If you think about the almond history, it's a fantastic location, right? You think the train is right there, so they're literally just taking the product out of the building and loading it onto a train that is there to just go right away.
Yeah, it was built to be a logistics hub, and it's really nice as a winery with big trucks coming through. It was built to have that happen. Where Mount Eden, the Mount Eden vineyards in the Santa Cruz Mountains, where I worked before, was up a 2-mile windy dirt road off a 2-mile lonely county road. So you get some really upset truck drivers when they finally got to the top and it just about jackknife a couple times on some of the curves. So it's a dream now for me.
Right, absolutely. And so can you go up, do you still able to go up into the silo?
Yeah, so the silo itself, we walk through it on your way in here into our sensory room. That was kind of the base of the silo. And it's not a whole lot of usable space unless you're using it as a storage facility. Initially, Ray Derby had thought he could use some of the compartments as concrete tanks for wine production, but they had to scrap that because they needed to do some retrofitting to make the silo tower safe again. But they did that, and now there's an elevator that goes to the top, and there's a small penthouse up there called the Almond room, and we do an elevated experience where you can taste library wines that we pick out, and the folks at Vivant Cheese will pair cheeses to the wines that we choose. So that's a fun option.
It must be a view up there.
Yeah, it's really nice. And one of the funny things is we do have pictures of the construction happening there, and you can see all the old oak trees. And 100 years ago, they look exactly the same as they did today. So you just wonder how old all these heritage oaks that we have are. They haven't grown much in 100 years, so they must have already been there for a couple hundred years.
Okay. So now you did mention Ray, and so Derby Wine Estates is actually owned by Ray and Pam Derby. So how did they get into wine? What made them decide this is what we want to do?
Ray was in the manufacturing business in Southern California. He eventually sold his business to a competitor and moved to Cambria. And I believe he was kind of involved in a little bit of farming there. I believe he initially started maybe with avocados. You'd have to ask Ray about his particular origin story. He eventually got involved in the wine industry by purchasing Laura's Vineyard, which is one of our 3 estate vineyards. So we have all estate fruit that we produce here, but we are a relatively large grower. So we have Laura's Vineyard, which is in the Estrella district. We have the Derby Vineyard, which is originally the Rosette Vineyard, which is in the Templeton Gap district. And then we have the Derbyshire Vineyard, which is in the San Luis Obispo Coast AVA, so the new AVA. Ooh. So we have a kind of a range of, our vineyard portfolio has quite a range of microclimates and different growing conditions. But I believe they purchased Derbyshire initially and kind of started thinking about planting that to grapes. They were told at the time that it's too cold, it's too close to the ocean. It's only about half a mile from the ocean, so it's probably the closest commercial vineyard that I know of to the Pacific and on the West Coast, but I'm sure someone could find one that's closer, but pretty close. Eventually they got involved either in a partnership or purchased Laura's Vineyard, which is it was named after Laura Eberly, so it's part of the original Eberly Ranch. It's off Highway 46 East. And they, all kind of about the same time, the late 90s, the early 2000s, they kind of acquired their vineyards, and then they worked as basically a grower with winery partners in the area, and we own and farm more than 400 acres. So we're a relatively large independent grower, and I only produce 5 to 10% of our overall production. So we're still, the majority of our production we're still selling as a grower rather than a producer of those grapes.
So even though you have that much grapes, which is a lot of acreage for a single entity, you're really still a boutique winery.
Correct. We process about 70 tons. So I do all of the hands-on production. I'm our only full-time production employee, and about 70 tons is about as much as I can do. I have a couple guys that help me on processing days. That's about it. And what's that like?
That's a lot. I'm sorry. That's a lot for one person. So.
Well, I don't play well with others, so it's probably for the best. No, I'm at a point in my career where I still have the ability to do a lot of the hands-on cellar work, and I find that I kind of get to understand the wines much better than if I'm just doing a blending trial or tasting out of tank, just working the pump overseeing, doing every step of the process by hand, kind of having your face in the tank. I think it gives me a more intimate relationship with the wines, and then helps me understand the changes that I want to make or the way to make those wines the best they can be once I've got them
Right. It's difficult for the grapes to talk to you if somebody else is doing the work, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And so Derbyshire was their first one, and when I heard that, all I could think about was Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, right.
I just thought of that. So really, they ultimately back then really just wanted to be growers, or did they say we're going to start with growing, but we do want to have our own winery, or was the winery kind of, hey, we're making this spectacular fruit and other people are taking it?
It was the latter. Initially, they didn't really have any desire to really make wine. This might be something you might have to edit out, but eventually they were selling grapes and to someone down in Santa Ynez. They bought a bunch of Petit Syrah from Laura's vineyard, and they made the wine, and they never paid their bills. So it was all very, amenable, but the Derbies had to go and repossess the wine.
Oh my God! Oh, that would have been kind of fun to video and see.
Right. It was all amenable, but they had to go take the wine. Then we have these thousands of gallons of Petit Syrah, and then they ended up, I believe, selling it in bulk or bottling a little bit of it, and eventually decided that kind of what you said, the latter part of what you said. Oh, this is something we can do. So they ended up kind of doing a little bit of crush again across 400 acres. You end up having a rounding error can end up being thousands of gallons or many tons of grapes or thousands of gallons of wine. So they said, well, we don't want to just, if we can't sell it or we fulfill our contracts and there's extra grapes and then we can't find a buyer, we want to have the ability to then, get all the value and not have any waste. So they started doing some custom crush production for a number of years, and then eventually during that time the portfolio of wines that we sell now kind of started to take shape. And then by the time we moved into this building, the brand had kind of set itself,
Right. Awesome. So when they decided to purchase this building, they had already had their vineyards.
Yeah, all
correct?
3 vineyards were in production.
So what did they have? A love of the history? They just thought that this was a great building. Like, to me, I would walk into this building after it was abandoned and go, man, this is really cool, but oh my God, what an undertaking. I'm not really sure I want to do this. So it must have been a massive undertaking to restore this, and not only restore it, but they kept it to historical accuracy, right? To standards, right? So I don't know if you can answer that because you weren't here, but it must have been a massive undertaking for them to do this. And now a word from our sponsor. The 27 individual tasting rooms that make up the downtown wine district are situated in the heart of Paso Robles city center, where you are only steps away from all Paso Robles has to offer in the way of dining, shopping, and entertainment. Visit downtown Paso Robles to find yourself among the greatest concentration of wineries in the area. In downtown, consumers can experience Paso Robles' rich and diverse wine country lifestyle, sample quality wines from each of the region's 11 distinct sub-appellations, and have the opportunity to meet vintners that are as passionate about downtown as they are about their wine.
Oh yeah, they talk about it. It is one of those things where it's a beautiful building, and again, the Derbies I think have a strong sense of giving back to the community. So I think again, it was part of that was maybe philanthropic in nature, is that they felt this is something we need a winery space. This is a building that has a lot of potential, both as a production facility and as something that can make the community a little stronger. So I think that was part of it. And I think once they got into it, they did have some.
Oops, this is
moments.
A lot fun.
Why did we do this moments? But in the end, I think it worked out for the best because they just did such a beautiful job. It's very stunning inside.
It absolutely is. When you come into the entry of, if you were a visitor, that entry room, the tasting room is beautiful. And now you have the deck that's outside. So, and you've had that pre-COVID. It's a beautiful outside setting, a beautiful inside setting, lots of windows out there so you can see everything that's going on.
Yeah, so the tasting room was that was an addition. So they allowed us to do that. So the tasting room is brand new, and then the rest of the building is the production area, and our office is original.
If somebody comes to visit, do they have an option to do a tour?
Usually we do. If we're really like, if they really want to do a tour, they can make an appointment to do so. Usually we can, but if it's really slammed in here or we don't have the tasting room staff has enough problems just keeping wine in everyone's glass.
Right.
I think, right.
Right. Absolutely. And now I read that when they started the building, when they did all this, they joined the Amphora Wine Trail. Now, I've been in Paso for 13 years, and I've never heard of the Amphora Wine Trail. So what is that? Is it still around?
There was a woman, I'll have to double check her last name, is Libby, who is part of the San Luis Obispo County Historical Society. I don't know the name of her organization, but I should. She did a documentary on amphora use. There's a man down the road from us at iTech who I think started importing them maybe about the time we opened this building, I think. So 7 to 10 years ago. And it kind of caught on in the area. It's kind of a traditional way of producing wine in some areas of Europe. It's a neutral vessel. It does have some flavor. It's kind of a terracotta, basically. And you can see it from where you're sitting there.
Oh, yes.
And they're very beautiful. And because he was importing them from Italy and is located here in our area, it kind of caught on with a lot of the winemakers. So Libby did a documentary just kind of talking about both how we use them, our experience, and I believe she also went to Georgia, the country, to talk to some of the winemakers there where it was a part of the traditional winemaking techniques there.
And had you ever worked with amphora prior to here? I
had not. And I do enjoy working with it. We had to do, ours is an older version. It was one of the first they kind of imported. So I had to do a little bit of renovating on it to get it up to par. But now I do enjoy using it. It's just another tool. It's really fun.
And what does the amphora do to the wine? Do you use it for just whites? Is it white and red? What do you like about it? What do you see as it imparting into?
It can be used for both white and red wines. I initially just used it for white and then converted it to red this year.
Okay.
Just to try something new. You can't really go back from red to white, unfortunately. Once you
the aspect of the red.
But if you had multiple, you could be using them for white and red wines. It is kind of similar to concrete, where it has kind of a neutral flavor to it, maybe a little bit of earthiness, stoniness, kind of that just clay mineral aspect. But I haven't noticed that overtly in any wine that I've stored in there. But it because it's not stainless steel, it does allow. It breathes, basically. It allows the wine to breathe. It's being aged in it as a vessel. So that exchange of oxygen will mellow the wine and kind of change the flavor of the wine. The hard part is understanding. Most winemakers understand how long élevage should be for a particular wine, given acidity, tannin structure, and those things. And for American and French oak barrels, similar for stainless, they understand the oxygen exchange that happens with those vessels. But with the terracotta clay, at least for me, it was kind of an unknown. Is it somewhere between? Is it more oxidative than a barrel? Is it less? So is it almost as tight as, say, close to stainless or concrete? So there's a little bit of trying to understand how to match the wine to the élevage that was going to happen in the amphora.
And have you come to love it? Hate it? In between? Some vintages are better than others.
I enjoy it. It's hard to work with in the cellar because there's no valves, there's no drain door, so it's a lot of like huffing and puffing and lifting and dumping and cleaning it. Those things are more difficult just because they're not as commonly used in the wine industry that a lot of the tools that we use to clean barrels and tanks don't really work for that purpose with the amphora, but I still enjoy it just because it creates more complexity, and it's also a great marketing tool because it's so beautiful. People are really interested when they see it. They have questions about it, so there's that as well. It's not all show, but it is very beautiful.
Very beautiful to look at. Yes. And so you poured for me 2 wines. And so tell us about 1510 White. What is it? What's in there? It's a blend because you're not calling it by a specific varietal. So what's in it and why 1510?
Yeah, so that 1510 is the fanciful name for a white and a red blend that we do from the Derby Vineyard, which is our vineyard in the Templeton Gap. It's actually the border between Templeton Gap and Willow Creek. So I think we get both the kind of the best qualities of both AVAs. We have really complex soil, like calcareous shale at the upper end of the vineyard, but we also get the really cooling effect of the winds that come through the Templeton Gap. So the 1510 blends are named after the location of the vineyard, which is 1510 Live Oak Road.
Oh, okay.
So they are not varietal wines, so we did have to come up with a name rather than calling them white and red blends. We came up the name they came up with was 1510. They're both Rhone style blends. So with the white wine, we were pouring the 2011 and the 2021. So I produced the 21, and Tiffany Vieira, Steve Vieira's wife, was the original winemaker for the Derbies, and she produced the 2011. She had Marsanne, Roussanne, Grenache Blanc, Viognier, and Picpoul Blanc. And I have Grenache Blanc, Viognier, and Picpoul Blanc. So I started making the Marsanne and the Roussanne kind of separately. I did the Roussanne in 2019 in the amphora. That was the first wine that I aged in the amphora. But I just love these wines. They don't get as much attention as the red wines, I think, out of Paso, the Grenache and the Syrah, and that's kind of a shame because I think they are probably better on, when you think of the best wines in the world. I think the white wines have so much potential here, and they just don't get talked about.
I talk about that all the time. People come to Paso and they're like, no, I just want the reds.
Give me the big reds.
Yeah, and I'm like, but we have whites here. There's definitely we're much higher in red than white as a region, right? In production wise, and definitely probably better known for the reds than the whites. But as you're saying, that's a shame because there's some beautiful whites here, and I'm always like, taste it. You can always dump it. People don't get insulted. Winemakers don't really get insulted if you spit the wine.
Exactly.
Like whatever. Give it a try. And people are always shocked almost when I tell them there's white here in Paso. And so these wines, first of all, for a 10-year, that's incredible. Like
these 1510 whites were one of the reasons I took the job, because I tasted the 2013 or 2014 when I came in 2019. And it was still so fresh and so alive. So this is kind of a fun exercise that I like to do with people. So the 2011 is still very light in color. It's not it's darker than the 2021, but not by much. Like if you told me this was a 2020 current release, I would not be like surprised without having just looking at it visually.
Right. If I didn't have the 2021
right next to it, I would not find this visually. I would not think it was 10 years old.
Not at all.
And but when you smell the nose, it's so expressive. It's very rich. It's very honeyed. Compared to the 2021 is much fruitier, much more mineral and stony. But the 2021 has really evolved. The 2011 has really evolved into a very rich, very complex wine. And I think that the low pH, the higher phenolic compound of some of the Rhone whites, it really allows for beautiful aging. So
wow. Oh yeah, that definitely. Oh, I'm salivating. That definitely. If that was, this would be a good Somm test wine if you wanted to make the Somm fail.
Yeah. Right.
Because I don't think they ever would guess that
10-year-old Paso Robles.
Yeah, nailed it.
Marsanne, Roussanne, Viognier blend. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And to be 100% honest, I am not the biggest fan of Marsanne.
Yeah.
Right. But this, it's, to me, because it's older, it's tamed that Marsanne. One of the things that I don't like about Marsanne is it is so much in your face and so big. Yeah. I guess on the palate, It
can be kind of oily or kind of broad in the palate.
Right, right. Kind of like some Viogniers have that. I was trying to explain that to some people. Like, don't turn away all Viognier because they're like, oh, I don't like what it does on my tongue. And I'm like, well, that's the body. That's that oily, the glycerol-y type feeling on your tongue. Not all Viogniers are that way. But to me, Marsanne has a tendency to have that. And so this, I mean, I don't know if it had it back in 2011 and it's kind of tamed down, but this is...
Well, it's only 31% Marsanne, 26% Roussanne, 22% Grenache Blanc, 11% Viognier, and 10% Picpoul Blanc. And the Grenache Blanc and the Picpoul Blanc, I think, really do a lot for the mouthfeel and giving some linear acidity to it and allowing the good parts, the richness, the honey of the Marsanne, the Roussanne, and the Viognier to really kind of shine through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely get that honey. This is good. And I hate when I say this, and I tell people all the time, just say what you taste, just say what you do, because there's nothing wrong with it. It actually reminds me of like a honey roasted cashew or a honey roasted, like there's a bit of that in there that is just delicious and seriously making me salivate, which to have that old of a wine
at 9:30 in the morning.
At 9:30 in the morning, right? So good. And now, and I do love Picpoul. So now tell us about, you said this is the 13?
2021.
2021,
so
10 11 and 21.
Yeah,
so
we
10
got
years
10 years apart. So in 2019, my first year, I did make the same, use the same grape varieties to make the blend. Then I just kind of decided I wanted to do the Marsanne and the Roussanne by themselves. They're traditionally grown kind of in the northern Rhone, and I would use this blend as well as the 1510 red. I'd kind of shift them to be more representative, maybe a blend that you'd find in the southern Rhone. I think it was just an idea that made sense to me at the time to kind of make the story about the wine a little easier to tell.
And now your Marsanne, Roussanne, are they together, or are you making a single varietal Marsanne and single varietal?
I made a single varietal Marsanne in 2019. Roussanne in 2019, and then in 22 I did a Marsanne.
Oh, okay. This is definitely a whole different, obviously, 10 years later, a whole different, more of that citrus, more of that honeydew-ish?
A little bit of ripe melon. I get a lot of kind of stoniness, a lot of minerality to this wine. And you kind of hope that the 2021 ages as well as the 2011 and start to pick up some of those richer notes. Okay. We'll see, though, because without the Marsanne and the Roussanne, it could be a totally different beast. But I guess that's kind of the problem with winemaking is you only get
one shot at
it. One life, and I'll know 10 years from now if I made the correct decision, and who knows if,
And now, a word from our sponsor. Exploring the Wine Glass is brought to you by Dracaena Wines. Dracaena Wines is an artisan winery located in Paso Robles, California. They have been producing wine since 2013. Their first vintage began with one wine, their classic Cabernet Franc, which received a 91 in Wine Enthusiast. Since then, they have increased production as well as expanded their portfolio, have received many accolades including multiple double gold medals and consistent 90-plus ratings. Visit their website www.dracaenawines.com or use the link in the show notes to schedule a private tasting and to see their entire portfolio. Purchase your award-winning wine and let Dracaena Wines help turn your moments into great memories. Yeah, definitely the stone fruits, like a white peach, right? White peach and the melon there. It's I love doing side-by-sides of, and it's interesting now that you smell the younger one, you can kind of see where this was, right?
You can kind of pick up the age. You kind of pick up the age on when you start with just the 2011. You don't really pick up the kind of the age on the wine until you taste it next to the 2021, which is maybe doing a disservice to the 2011. But I served. My distributor from Georgia came a couple of years ago, last year, and we did a dinner at Brasserie Laurent.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to say Bistro Laurent, but there's been a name change there. So, and we had a magnum of the 2011, and it was just fantastic. As you can imagine, it was like the same profile of this wine, but much tighter, much brighter as well. So that was, again, this is a wine that I love to show to people, and Tiffany did such a good job on that wine. So
yeah, this is beautiful also, and it is interesting how you can now see where this was years ago. Like, very cool. See, gotta love science.
Right.
Right? Absolutely. Now, What do you think, not coming from or originating from Paso, which I didn't originate from Paso either, what drew you to Paso once you were here? What did you like about Paso? Because I think Paso is very different than other wine regions. Now, never really, I mean, I've been to Santa Cruz Mountains quite a few times, but more for other things than the wine. What do you like about Paso?
My wife told me we were moving here. So. What drew me here was
my wife
not wanting to get in trouble.
There you go. Yes, dear.
Exactly. But to be honest, I was a little worried. I hadn't been to Paso for maybe 10 years. And so it was probably 2006, 2007, the last time I was here. And so much has happened, I think, with the wine industry really taking off, and a lot of this, the hospitality that comes around wine and the wine industry, the restaurants, the bars, the hotels, the spas, all these nice things that really kind of blossomed, I think. So when I came down to visit, my wife came down a couple months before I did, because I had to finish our harvest work in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So I immediately was kind of enamored with the area, especially kind of the little towns like Santa Margarita and Creston, these little gems, Templeton, that most people don't know about, that are kind of Paso adjacent and are part of kind of the larger Paso wine community, are just really fun to go to. And just coming from the Bay Area, just not having the traffic, I was living right on the edge of Silicon Valley, and there's the traffic and the cost of living and the housing and all that. Being able to, come down here and settle into the kind of slower lifestyle on the Central Coast was something that I appreciated once I got down here.
The slow lifestyle.
Right, exactly.
Right? And you are considered a downtown winery.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes, we are.
So what do you think is, I mean, I know you didn't have the decision to choose downtown, but you're here. What do you think is special about the wineries downtown and the restaurant, like just downtown as its own entity? What do you like about it? What do you think is special about it?
Oh, it just has that energy, it's the center of the community. It's the first place people go. It'd be our beautiful kind of mission style. We don't have a mission, obviously, but we still have that kind of old California style square, like Sonoma Valley, where I grew up. That was just kind of the way the towns were established. And that really gives like a focal point to the community, where that's, you can just not know where you're going and not, just end up there, and this is the place to be. Everything kind of radiates out from there. So because the wine industry is so important to the area, but it's spread out. It was the largest, or still is, the umbrella Paso AVA, I think, is the largest AVA in California. Mm-hmm. Things change so fast. Don't fact check me on that.
You go to sleep and it's a new thing tomorrow.
It is nice to kind of have that wine production here in the downtown. It kind of is kind of a starting place, I think, for a lot of the people. They see the winery, they see the grapes kind of coming, on the trucks through downtown, and I think that's a good thing. Because we're one of the few people who are actually making wine.
That's what I was going to say. Now, that's actually a unique thing to Derby, because the majority of the wineries that are downtown are tasting rooms. They're producing their wine someplace else, but Derby is actually producing the wine here in downtown. So
it's kind of fun. Like, you kind of, in the afternoon or in the morning, you can smell the beer brewing at the Silva Brewing over there. You can smell kind of the oak fires from the various restaurants, the Hatch, and hopefully you can see a Derby truck delivering grapes, and it just brings a lot of energy, I think, to the downtown area.
Yeah,
that production aspect.
And so, do you spend, when you're not working, do you spend time in downtown?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I live only maybe 5 minutes from here, so. We're always down here at the different restaurants and bars, and just kind of hanging out. It's just a nice place to be. Yeah,
it's definitely. I mean, Paso is beautiful for wine. Fantastic for wine, fantastic for so many things. But one location, I think downtown has any place else in Paso beat, because you park your car and you just walk, and you have amazing restaurants, and I mean, you can shop. We have clothing stores and fabric stores and everything else you can think of. Everything is right there.
Exactly.
So It's nice. Plus the park.
Yeah, the whole downtown community is tailored for people to enjoy themselves and have a good time, you know.
Right, absolutely. And so if we come back to the building itself, we have another kind of well-known winery in Paso, not in downtown, that the joke is First Castle on the right, right? So I kind of see Derby as that same type of landmark thing, as such a historical aspect of Paso. You're like, oh, it's that peach color building as you go past the freeway or whatever. And you kind of mentioned it earlier, that people are like, oh, I see it all the time, but this is my first time in. Do you think that, like, does Derby see themselves as being a landmark for Paso?
Well, the building was here first, and we do run into issues with that, because people are like, I didn't know that was a winery. I didn't know you could do wine tasting there, because I've drove by it 1,000 times. It was here,
forever.
You might have drove by it in 1986, and they definitely weren't doing any wine tasting there. So there are some issues with that. It's like, okay, it's relatively new as a wine tasting room and production facility. So getting people to understand, hey, yeah, come on down. Like, we're open 7 days a week. Lovely wines, great vineyards.
And so you mentioned the three main vineyards, but what, like the one in Tempe, you're obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but you probably are growing different varietals varieties, I should say, in each of those different vineyards. So what varieties do you grow overall, or is that like too massive to talk about?
I believe we grow 27 different varieties.
Wow. And what do we say? There's 32 varieties that grow
from Albarino to
Paso?
Zinfandel, as
there you go.
Ray likes to say. Well, definitely in the San Luis Obispo coast, we grow grapes that were traditionally grown in more cooler climates in Europe. So we have Pinot Gris, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and a small amount of Syrah and Pinot Meunier. So we do so.
Is there a sparkling at Derby?
Yes, we made the vineyard was so close to the ocean that initially they were worried that they weren't even going to be able to make table wine. So the first production year, I believe, was 2007. They made all sparkling.
Nice.
And they did again in 2014, and we just sold out we have maybe 20 cases of an extended tirage 2014 that we haven't labeled yet. But that'll be the end. We'll have to make some new sparkling. So I'm looking to work with some of the sparkling producers that we sell to at Derbyshire are going to maybe help me
conquer that process.
Bring the sparkling program back, But yeah, so we have those varieties at the coast. We have initially the Derby vineyard was just Rhone varieties. We've since planted Spanish varieties. Our vineyard manager is really kind of excited about growing Spanish varieties. So we do a couple of Spanish style blends. We have Tempranillo, Graciano. We planted Graciano as Graciano, and we planted Mourvèdre as Graciano. So we have a couple different clones of Graciano. Albarino, Carignan and Grenache are kind of sort of just those Mediterranean. They could be the Spanish. We call them Rhone varieties. Maybe the Spanish would call them Spanish varieties, but they go into some of our Spanish
I have
blends.
a big issue with that.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Why is it called? It's not French. These are Spanish wines.
Exactly.
These are Spanish grapes.
And Steve, our vineyard manager, would agree with you, I think.
Do you think that has, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, do you think that has to do with him thinking climate change? Because the Spanish varieties are so ready for climate change,
honestly,
right?
I think he just loves Spanish wine.
Okay.
But also, they do so well here that there's more than one reason, I think, that he wanted to plant them. We'd have to ask him. And then in our Laura's vineyard at this point is basically just Petite Syrah and Cabernet. So, so in a warmer climate, it's big reds. And they do very well there. One of the issues, I think, with Derby as a brand is that as a grower, it's great to have 27 different varieties to offer to your winery partners. As a winery, it can be kind of daunting because it's like, well, we make Spanish wines, we make Bordeaux wines, we make cool climate wines, Rhone wines, but there's so many wineries in the AVA now, and there's someone who just makes Spanish wines.
Right.
And there's someone who just makes Rhone wines. There, so it can be a little bit of consumer choice overload. It's like, well, what do you do best? Well, we do everything really well. And I think as a brand, that's been kind of challenging for us, and something that I've been working on since I took over the wine program, to maybe try and bring a little more focus. Because at one point we were almost making all 27 of the different varieties, and it was becoming a little out of control, I would say. Even though they're all good.
Right.
If you go to a restaurant and there's 200 items on the menu, you just don't know what's good.
Right.
When someone says that they're all good, and you say, well,
you have to specialize in something.
What does everyone else order?
Right.
Okay, so that's something we're working on as a brand, and that's just kind of the growing pains of transitioning from having 400 acres and 27 varieties, and how to make, succinctly turn that into a cohesive brand.
Right, absolutely. What do you, when somebody wants to come to Derby, right, how do they come? Are you by appointment? Are you walk-ins? Both?
Both. The elevated experience is by appointment only. What we do, except we're open 7 days a week, and walk-ins are always welcome. We also take reservations, especially if you're a larger group. But if you show up, we will pour you some wine. We've got a lot of space. We have a nice patio. It's been kind of June gloom here for a while, but
yeah, right. What odd weather we've had.
The patio is really nice when in the shade and when the weather warms up. So we are open for business. But if you want to do like something special, an elevated experience, or a larger group, it's reservation only.
And I was joking with Ted, because he's on Railroad. So I was joking with Ted, is like, well, they can either walk here, they can drive here, or they can just jump off of the train.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, they can basically do the same thing here.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So what is it, 220 and 420? If you're out on the patio, you get a little added breeze.
Yeah, right. the Coach Starlight and the Daylight and Starlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, what is your favorite thing about being in the wine world?
Oh, that's a tough one. For me, it's always the kind of elusive idea of terroir, and like these. It's kind of this combination of the soil, the climate, and the men and women who are doing the production, and then the grape is kind of the medium for all those three things that come together to maybe make what terroir is, right? So especially with older vines and these kind of these beautiful things where you see people have been making the same wine from the same place for 100 years from the same vines, and it's generational, and it's very expressive of a time, a place, a people, a grape, all these things. I like that kind of expression.
And so this is a difficult question, I know, but I'll make it a little more generalized. Do you prefer working with white wines or red wines?
For most of my career, I mostly just made Chardonnay. My wife called me a one-trick pony for a long time. I think white wines are harder so there's a little more care and attention that needs to be paid, I think, when you make white wines. Mm-hmm. Not to say that making red wines is easy, but I feel like when you have a really beautiful expression of white wine, it's so precise and so elegant, where reds can be kind of, even the best ones can be almost overpowering sometimes. So the elegance in white wine, I think, if I had to choose, I'd only be a white winemaker.
I think that we've said many times that red wine is more forgiving.
Yeah.
Right? If you miss something that's going awry in a red wine, you have a larger window to fix it.
Yes.
Than
exactly.
in a white wine.
You can't really go in reverse with the white wines. Like once things have gone off the rails, so to speak, you're kind of sunk.
You're just going faster and faster, right? It's Casey's train or whatever, going off the racks, going off the rails. Absolutely. Well, these wines are beautiful, and I love that I got to taste the the 10-year difference between these wines. I love clever names. And you gave a little smirk about fanciful, because I joke about that all the time. Like, we don't come up with that. That's like actually a governmental.
It's the TTB dictating.
They literally call it a fanciful name on their website. And it's not always easy to come up with those fanciful names, but it's nice, there's a good story.
And they're all taken now.
Oh, they are.
You have to really go out on a limb to find something that's not taken these days.
Right. And now I'm looking at the label itself. So that's the ocean, and that's basically the designation of where your vineyard is that this comes from.
Yeah, so we have a picture of the coastline on our main label. We call our classic label here. And there's a small compass that's part of our branding that on each vineyard designate wine that with the classic label here, the compass will mark the side of the vineyard. And in some cases, we have wines that come from both Derby and Laura's vineyard, so that'll have 2 compasses and 2 vineyard names on it. So it's just a nice way to geographically locate the wines, and especially with Derbyshire, because it was without an AVA for so long. It was San Luis Obispo County, even though it's a very special place. The Steve Vieira, our vineyard manager, was a big part of the group that got the San Luis Obispo Coast AVA designated and approved, and that was a big deal. But before that really allowed us to put the Derbyshire wines with this label to say this vineyard is right on the ocean, even though we produce it in Paso. This vineyard is right on the ocean. And so
how long does it take you to, if you're harvesting there, to process here?
The drive, it's only about, in a big truckload of grapes, it's probably 45, 50 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But, we usually pick early in the morning. Steve will start, right before dawn usually, and, we'll have the grapes here in the morning and
still
in tank
very
by
cold.
And then, the grapes never get warm out there, and then they'll be in tank by the early afternoon because the yields are very small out there. It's a 70-acre vineyard, but we only get half a ton an acre because we're so close to the ocean. So picking them actually takes a long time. It's hard for the crew sometimes because it's not just a wall of grapes. It's not 8 tons an acre or something like that. It's kind of a hunt and peck situation.
Right, absolutely. And but I mean, there's theories, or whether what side of the fence you're on. Low quantity doesn't always equal quality.
No,
but
balance.
There you go.
If you're artificially cropping your vine down to 1 ton an acre when it really wants to be doing 3, you're just first of all, you're just throwing money away, and second, you're just kind of steering the wine towards more vegetative growth when it could be using that to
make better fruit.
Make more and better fruit.
Absolutely. So is there anything that I missed that you think people should know about Derby Wine Estates? I
think you kind of nailed it. Okay. There's nothing dramatic that I can think of.
Well, I'm excited. I learned you have a sparkling.
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm, now I'm really, really, really excited. And then winemakers don't always know the answer, but how do they find you on social?
I don't social media.
Is it
go on the website Derby Wine Estates? Yeah. Hashtag Derby Wine Estates.
There you go.
That works. Yeah.
There you go. So, and the website is Derby Wine Estates.
DerbyWineEstates.com. We have a brand new website, and all the information that you would need to connect with us online would be found there.
Is right there. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time and sharing all your amazing wine and information about Derby.
Thank you, Laura.
Awesome. Thanks.
So you and I can feel.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoyt-Budd. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com and sign up for my newsletter at exploringthewineglass.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Podcast music is Wine by Key Vince. Until next week, slancha.
I'm on Key Vince, what am I tell you? There is always time. this glass right now.